There we go. All right. So thank you guys for joining us. This is again, Milena and Lou, if you could turn off your video for us so that we can focus on the main panelists. Thank you. I appreciate that. So this is ADA for Dummies is what we originally called it, but it's turned into this great panel that we've been able to assemble. I'm really happy to have everybody here that we have on this panel, including Chris Sacca from Lighthouse in Orlando, Emily Cleary, who's a UX instructor, lead instructor at Boca Code, Jeremy Horlick from ADA Compliance, and Claudio Luis Vera, who is like the ADA expert in South Florida. We've got some really awesome people on the panel. I'm Todd Albert. I'm the founder and lead instructor at Boca Code. And I just want to ask the panelists to take a moment and just introduce yourselves. Chris, would you start us off? And I'm just sorry, I'm going in order that you guys are on my screen. There's no, no favorites here.
No problem at all. Thank you, Todd. My name is Christopher Sacca. Really happy to be part of this. Just a little bit about me. Todd's been my best friend for 27 years. We went to school together. Right now I'm an instructor at a school for the blind in Orlando called Lighthouse of Central Florida. I teach independent living skills to people that are visually impaired. I have a visual impairment myself, but when I was younger, I actually used to climb trees for a living, and I have a degree in horticulture science. And when I was a young adult, I lost most of my eyesight. So that's how I got involved in Lighthouse of Central Florida. I had a career change halfway through my life. And so now I help other people that have had the same issues that I've had with their eyes. And so what I do now is I teach people how to be independent, people that can't see. And it's just recently now that I'm starting to work with people with accessibility. So teaching folks how to use a computer or how to use an iPhone that aren't able to see it. And the main skill that I'm teaching right now is something called VoiceOver, which is an accessibility that's built into the iPhone, and it allows people to use the iPhone that can't see it. And my main demographic of people that I work with are the seniors. And as you may have known, seniors a lot of times they're intimidated by technology, but because it's so beautifully designed by Apple, it really gives them a way that they can learn it and not be afraid of it. And it's real successful. I'm real happy with that, and with the position that I have. I feel real fortunate that I'm able to do that. And I look forward to this panel tonight. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Chris. Emily, you want to tell us about yourself and your background a bit?
Sure. Hey everyone, my name is Emily. I am, like Todd said, lead instructor at Boca Code. I met Todd earlier this year before the pandemic. It's crazy to think that I met Todd this year. I was doing a public speaking engagement at a conference. Todd happened to be in my session, which was at like 8 in the morning. So kudos to Todd. And that's how we met. And as far as, a little bit about my background, I'm originally from New York. I've been in Miami for like 4 years, South Florida for a little longer than that. I have a master's degree in sociology. I have a heavy writing background, research background as well. And then I went to a tech boot camp, basically, back in 2018. That is where I originally met Claudio, the godfather of accessibility. I like to think of him as, Yeah, other than, working in tech and doing these kinds of things, teaching and doing things for clients, I like do freelance and independent consulting. I'm a singer, so I'm a musician at night, and the weekends I turn into this other person by the name of Soleil. I was just on a live jam last night. It was really fun. And yeah, that's a little bit about me. Happy to be.
Real quick, I turned off the screen share because the closed captions were working in Zoom. So if they stop working, if somebody can holler in chat if I don't notice, and I'll share the screen again. But hopefully, I wanted to highlight the panelists. And I like to say about Emily that she's a rock star by day and a rock star by night. She's literally a rock star at night and figuratively a rock star by day. Jeremy, give us a quick intro to who you are and where you fit into this picture.
Sure. Well, the most important thing to know is I'm your neighbor. So if you're home right now, you're literally about 50 feet from where I'm sitting.
Maybe 100.
Maybe 100, you're right. And I took sort of a circuitous path to the world of accessibility. I graduated from Michigan. I went to LA, and after spending many years in the business in Hollywood, moved to Florida like so many other people and settled into a life here, and spent some time in the nonprofit world on Wall Street, and then got the bug, the accessibility bug. So we launched ADA Site Compliance. Well, I've been on 3 years, but our CEO launched it about 5 years ago. And what we do is we audit and we remediate websites, all sorts of digital properties. So it's apps, it's mobile websites, it's PDFs, it's captioning, it's everything you can imagine. And I would say 3 years ago, when you told somebody, hey, I work in the world of digital accessibility, many people just looked at you kind of blankly. And today, when I talk to somebody who's in business and I ask them about accessibility for their site, I'm shocked when they haven't received a lawsuit at this point. So that's how far we've come in the last 3 or so years in this field.
Awesome. Yeah, and Jeremy is one of my favorite neighbors I've ever had. So thanks for being such a good neighbor and also such a great part of the accessibility community and tech community. And speaking of great parts of the accessibility and tech community, Claudio, tell us about you.
Well, let me clarify one thing for certain. Like, the real ADA expert in the room here is Jeremy. Okay, so he is more well-versed and more well-read when it comes to the terms of the law and the different cases that are out there. Honestly, I can't even come close to the amount of domain knowledge he has in that respect. So my gig or my strength here, my superpower, is more in terms of design and accessibility. I came from a background of like 30 years in design and front end development, and then about 4 years ago did an abrupt shift into accessibility. And so when I did that shift, I was probably the first person to really begin talking about it down here in South Florida. It's amazing to see how in 3 years it's turned from, sorry, I got to turn this down a little bit. In 3 years, it's evolved from me speaking about this and introducing the term to us being able to have a panel here with everybody here with this sort of domain knowledge. And it's awesome to see, folks like Emily teaching this or speaking about this in their own respective boot camps. So, this is part of an effort. I really feel like it's more like part of a movement that's just beginning. And we're just about to hit that sort of hockey stick point where we're really, the awareness is really growing to this, and we're really going to be in a position to make more change. So part of what we're doing tonight really is really trying to educate people on, like, what are the basic things that you can do to get started on this journey towards accessibility.
Alan Albert has joined the meeting.
Great. That was a great introduction. And I like, as you guys can tell who are tuning in, what not only do we have this great panel with amazing speakers on it, but we also have so much respect for each other, and have also become, those of us who weren't friends before are friends now. This is not our first time meeting, as you've heard from some of them, and some of us have known each other for a long time. But our mission is all the same, which is accessibility. And one of the things I want to do is I want to give everybody a chance. I want to make this somewhat informal, but I also want to give everybody a chance to kind of tell us something that you really want to share with the audience. I think, Chris, we were talking about starting with you, and starting with, maybe you had a little demonstration for us about what it is we're really talking about here tonight.
Sure. So, accessibility has many different forms. There's a lot of different disabilities out there. The two that I can speak most intelligently about tonight are the ones having to do with visual impairment. And as far as people in the community that have visual impairment, believe it or not, 90% of visually impaired people can see something, which means that they can see a little bit, but what they see is very different than what you would consider normal vision. So for those 90% of people, they may see just light, they may see color, they may see motion. Sometimes people are in a situation where they have very clear vision, but their field of view is very narrow. So for instance, tunnel vision is a real good example of that, where you might have perfect vision, but if your visual field is like looking through a drinking straw, even though you might be able to see well, if what you're seeing is just a little speck and everything else is dark, you're going to be really affected by that. And there's so many different combinations of what visual impairment is, depending on the type of eye disease that somebody might have. Sometimes, like for instance, with strokes, half of your vision is cut off depending on what side of the body your stroke is. So you might be able to see okay, but it's like having a black curtain covering maybe 60% of your field of view. And then there's other things like diabetes and glaucoma and all different things. But believe it or not, only 10% of visually impaired people are 100% blind, which is seeing black, no light, no nothing. Now for me, I can see color and motion, but I can't see printed material of any kind. So when
that's shifted over the years, right? Like, when I met you, you were able to use, screen, like a visual tech that could blow things up really big for you, but now your vision has deteriorated to where that's no longer an option, correct?
Correct. So when I was younger, the way I used the computer was I just saw the screen magnified. So I had a program running on the computer that just made the print bigger. And then through the years, I've amped it up more and more and more. For people that use magnification software, once you get to about 6 or 7x, you really get to a point where you should start considering screen readers, because what happens is as you amp up the size of the print, you can see less and less of it. So once you get to about 7x, what you can see is so limited that you can almost get lost on the screen. Now, what a lot of us do is a lot of people, including myself, you resist the urge to go to a screen reader because it's like learning another language. Human beings, we're just visual creatures. we want to use our eyes for everything, and just the way that we're made, 80% of what we take in around us is visual. So people that can't use their eyes, it's at first it's this giant void. You still want to use your eyes, even though your eyes might not work so well. So there's a lot of people out there that are fighting with that magnification. They might be using it at 10x, and that's, you know, where you can only see maybe a word at a time. And in order to even effectively get around a website, you really have to know where everything is. Because just to use your mouse to try to get around, it's very, very tedious, only being able to see a very, very small portion of that website.
Claudia Louise Durant
So
lowered hand.
then what happens is when you get to that point, you make that transition to what's called a screen reader. And a screen reader is a program or an accessibility feature that reads the screen to you. And it's a wonderful thing. The issue with it is it's learning how to use it. So the computer reads what the computer will read everything. But as you know, when you look at a screen, a lot of times for normally sighted people, you know what you're looking for. So your eyes are going to gravitate towards what you want, or you're going to skim an area of text just looking for bits and pieces of what you want. But a screen reader doesn't know what you want or what you're looking for unless you tell it, because it's designed to read everything. And as you know, on a website or an application, there's a lot of stuff out there that you really might not want to hear. So the trick is learning how to use a screen reader, using the keyboard as a control center to tell the screen reader what you want to hear and what you don't want to hear. And
Or
that,
in the case of an iPhone, you're not using a keyboard, but you're using like gestures on the screen, right? To skip around.
that's exactly right. Now, Todd, would you like me to demonstrate
Please.
what voiceover is?
Yeah, I think that for those of us who haven't had to experience that would be really, a great illustration. Unfortunately, we have some people on the call that are deaf or hard of hearing, so the experience for them is probably going to be very different, right? For Chris, though, he's going to give us a demo of what hearing a website instead
Okay.
of seeing it is like.
Now, can you guys, now this is tricky for me because I can't see you guys. So
Don't worry about us. Just hold your phone near your computer so we can hear it. We don't need to see.
Okay.
We want to see you.
Okay. So one thing I want to point out is that Apple has come up with a system, but that's, in my opinion, it's so user friendly compared to the
Jose
PC.
Hurtado has left. the
Because when a person uses the PC, you have to know a lot about keyboard commands to navigate that screen reader. But what Apple has done is they've given the user the ability to control the screen reader with their fingers. And there's a lot to be said for that, because especially, like I said, working with older people, being able to just put the keyboard aside and use your fingers it's an ingenious way to interact with the phone. So can you guys see that, or can everybody see that I'm holding up just a regular iPhone?
Yes.
Yep.
So when VoiceOver is running, the screen doesn't look any different. Okay, the phone looks normal, but I can't see the screen, so I don't know what's here. The way VoiceOver is designed is if I take my finger and I swipe from left to right, making a horizontal line on the screen, it tells the computer to navigate down the screen, reading to me one line item at a time. So right now, I believe it's on the home screen with the icon. So if I
Uber, messages, 100 mail, no unread emails, phone, page 1 of 4, adjustable, contacts, settings, 1 new item, notes, reminders, 1 task due today,
can you see that I'm taking my finger and I'm just making what's called a horizontal swipe on the screen. So I'm just taking one finger and just running it along
Mark
the
Sexton has
screen.
joined the meeting.
And every time I do that, it's gonna read the next line item or the next icon or the next entity. that's
And then
on-
how do you select, Chris?
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just swipe in one direction. And if I go past what I want, I'm just gonna go the other way. So let me show you real quick.
App Store, News, Pandora, Capital One, Safari,
Now, if I skip what I want, I just swipe the other way,
Capital One, Pandora, News, App Store.
okay? Now, how do I select something? So let's say that I want to hear some news. The way VoiceOver works is there's no visual component with it whatsoever, okay? Which means that I can use this phone with it facing you and not using the visual component of the screen at all. And that's what makes it really special. So when I hear what I want, I take my finger and I tap the screen 2 times, and that tells the computer to execute that action. And if I take one finger and I tap the screen 2 times, that tells the phone to execute the last thing that it said. So if I swipe on the screen,
News,
okay, so the phone just said news.
Matthew Palmer.
That's what I want. So I'm just going to tap the screen anywhere. Doesn't matter where.
News, double tap to dismiss pop-up window, button.
Okay. So now it's opened up the news. And as I continue to swipe in one direction, it's going to begin to read me what's on the screen.
Close, button.
Okay, so let me get rid of the ad there.
Apple News, November 5th, heading.
Okay.
News feed, Apple News, November 5th, heading. Top stories. Link. Reading sensitive calls. Why news outlets' electoral maps differ from one another. Apple News' map uses AP data. Read now in link.
Now, Todd, is the speaking rate too quick? Should I slow it down? Can everybody understand what the phone is saying, or is it too fast?
No, I think the speed is great, Chris, but could you maybe just demonstrate a website to us? Because I
Sure.
think for most people that would be the most
Activate.
Okay.
the simplest.
Last updated.
Sure.
News.
Yeah, and so a couple of people are saying that the closed captions are blocking Chris's demo. I think that one is you should be able to turn off the closed captions at the Zoom buttons at the bottom. You should be able to turn those off. But Chris, I think for me at least, I'm more interested in hearing what it is that you hear. But I know Claudio was interested. Claudio's sitting here saying, "Oh my God, I got so many questions." Right? Claudio, do you want to start firing questions off as he's going? Or
Well, sure. Well, sure. I mean, because I do a lot of app testing with VoiceOver, and maybe I'm overthinking this because there are from my point of view and from what I've studied in VoiceOver, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of gestures. You've got single finger, single swipe. Then you've got different numbers of taps, then different combinations with different numbers of fingers and
Yes.
the directions of the swipe. So if you multiply all of those, you've already got close to 100 different combinations that you could do. So I can't imagine you having older students in your classes and then going in and learning those hundreds of different gestures there. So how do you manage that cognitive load there?
So the beauty of it is you can learn as much or as little as you want. Now for my older ones, there's probably, I would say maybe 6 fundamental gestures that they can learn, and they can do the basics on everything. And it's kind of like math, where you have to learn to add, subtract, multiply, and divide. And then once you know that, you can go on to advanced mathematics. VoiceOver is very similar, where if you can just learn some basic navigation gestures, which is swiping left, swiping right, swiping up, swiping down, and then the tap and the double tap, you can really accomplish just about everything that you need. And then as you begin to learn it and want to learn more and more and more and more, the gestures get more advanced. So for my students, I teach them until they're content with their level of knowledge. So the older ones is just web navigation, and then when they hear what they want, they just tap twice and it opens up that link, and they're fine. And then the younger ones, of course, you can just dive into it and go as crazy as you want with it.
So let's hear what a website sounds like to you.
Okay, so I have a website up on the screen, and actually this is a good example because part of it's not accessible, and I'll show you why.
Harry P. Lee Gardens.
Okay, so this is just a website for a botanical garden. It seemed fitting.
Chris is a plant fanatic.
I am a plant fanatic. So
Gary Moore has left.
what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna swipe in one direction, and that is gonna read the website line by line. Okay, there's a gesture I can do where it'll read the whole thing continuously, but I don't want to do that right now because a lot of good stuff is going to get missed. So I'm just going to swipe, and it's just going to go line by line.
Harry P. Lee Gardens. Heading level 1.
So everything the phone says is significant, and it's understanding what you're hearing is half of it. So it said Harry P. Lee Gardens heading level 1. So
I just want to stop for 1 second for the web developers that are on this call. Notice that the heading level that we use, the H1 tag, it's telling Chris this is a heading level 1, right? I've seen a movement in the web recently where people stop using these heading tags and they just use divs, and they use styling on it to make the text bigger because it looks like a heading. But by getting away from using the actual HTML tags, you're screwing things up for the readers and for your SEO. So sorry, Chris, just had to throw that little plug in there.
And headings are mega important for screen readers, because if you're using a PC, that the headers tell the screen reader where to go, and the main issue is websites today have a lot of stuff on them, a lot of fluff, a lot of stuff that's not needed. So let's say I want to read a news article about something, but the website has advertisements and Facebook links and Twitter links and just everything. The screen reader doesn't know how to differentiate between ads and fluff unless the website is set up to do that. So if a website's designed right, they're going to put the meat of the article, they're going to make that a separate header, so that when you're using a screen reader and you hit a keystroke to tell it go to the next header, it's going to take you to the beginning of the news article or the beginning of what you want. Because without it, it's going to go into the advertisements and get everywhere but where you need it to go. Okay, so I'm going to just continue on.
Unpronounceable.
Okay, this is why I chose this website, because did you hear it say unpronounceable? Let me go back so you can hear it again.
Harry P. Lee Gardens. Heading level 1. Unpronounceable.
Yep.
Unpronounceable. 1,340 reviews. Number 39. Of 429. Things to do in Orlando. Link.
Okay, the unpronounceable part is not good. I have no idea what that is. I don't know if it's a link. I don't know if it's a button. And with the way Apple is when VoiceOver approaches a link or a selectable option, it's going to say link. After it says link, that tells the user that if you double tap the screen at that moment, it's going to go to that link. If VoiceOver says the word button, it means that whatever it is that it just said is a visual button, that if I tap the screen twice, it's like pushing the button. So it's kind of like little hints that Apple's put in there to tell the user, okay, that's something selectable that you just heard.
1,193. Overview. Explore 50 acres of beautiful gardens and historic home minutes from downtown Orlando. Discover over 40 different collections, including a tropical rainforest, Florida's largest formal rose garden, butterfly garden, and much more. Liu Gardens is ellipsis.
So that part's pretty good. So it read the opening statement.
More.
So it said more.
Close
It's
now.
interesting that more, it says ellipsis and then more, but it didn't tell you that that was a link, right? You would think like ... more, that's probably a link to click and read more, but the site didn't tell you that.
Right. And they could have put more data in there that would have been a little bit more helpful.
Hours today. 9 a.m. 5 p. 1000 overview.
Oops.
More. Close now. Hours today. 9 a.m. 5 p.m.
So that's pretty good.
More. Close now. Hours today. See all hours. Suggested duration. 2 to 3 hours. Improve this listing. Link.
See, it's not reading everything, and that's to me a little bit of a design error.
Recommended experiences in and around Orlando. Kennedy Space
Yeah,
Center.
what do you, I mean, do you even know like when it's just skipping things, like what is it? Or you have no idea because
I have
you
no
can't tell.
idea. And it's really interesting you say that because a lot of times like Uber is a good example. Every time Uber updates, they forget to label the button. So when Uber updates and I go to the Uber app, it'll say button, 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 button. And I have no idea what's what. And it's a headache and a half until they fix it. So until they fix it, there's just the user really has no idea what
So
it is.
Chris, you
It's
mentioned
not labeled.
that the headings are really important. What are some other things like, because I happen to know there's a handful of, I could see at least 4 or 5 web developers that are here on the call with us in the audience. What are some things that, aside from the headings, and, Claudio put some things in the chat, like landmarks, like article and section. What are some other things that are really important for people to know about, to web developers to know, to include in their website to make that experience better for you?
So a lot of times the pictures, they forget to label the picture. So when voiceover hits it, it just
6:34 p.m.
when voiceover hits the picture, it just reads either the file name or just a whole bunch of code, and the user has no idea what any of that is. But there's a way to do alt text or whatever it's called, the Apple version of that, where when the phone gets to the picture, it will describe the picture to the user.
And what's a good descript, like what should that alt text look like on an image? So I put an image on my website. What should that alt text, what should I put in that alt
It's
text?
just a very basic, just telling the user, for instance, it'll say something like a picture of mountains and a sunset, or 3 people sitting at a kitchen table, or just a very basic overview of what the picture is, so that when the screen reader gets to it, instead of reading a big, long, giant code that nobody knows what that is, it's just telling the user that there's a break in the text and there's a photograph that's in the way.
Yeah, Jeremy, what's your take on
Hey.
all this?
Todd, so I wanted to jump in for a second. Chris, that's really, really great info to have. One thing I'd point out is you don't want to actually write the word image of
Picture.
or picture of in
Correct.
the alt text. That'll actually get you flagged for a violation of the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. So I just wanted to jump
Absolutely.
in with that. What was your, I don't want to cut Chris off, so
Oh, no, not at all, please.
yeah. No, that was all I had to say on that, and the fact that decorative images, as I think maybe you discussed already, shouldn't have alt text. That's something
So-
we see. Yeah.
Or
So
an empty
Jeremy,
tag.
why don't you tell us a little bit, so you look at accessibility, from a very different lens, through a very different lens than Chris, right? You're looking at it more from a legal and a technical standpoint. So can you give us some insight into, your views on this?
Yeah, sure. You mentioned that you have a number of developers that are on the webinar with us. Usually when I'm speaking with people during the day, I'm speaking with people in the C-suite of a company or a lawyer. But that prism would change slightly with an audience of developers. So I guess
they're not all, there's
Okay.
a wide variety. Like I said, we've got Saida, who's the, CEO of an app development company. Well, of an accessibility company, actually, so she's maybe not the exact audience you're looking for, but, we do have C-suite people here with us as well. So.
Yeah, well, as I said at the opening, at this point, it's very rare to find somebody in the C-suite of a company, big or small or mid-market, who hasn't received either a lawsuit or multiple lawsuits, or a threat, usually in the form of a demand letter, to make their website compliant and accessible. So this is something, again, that most people who run companies will be familiar with. And for those who are coders and who might take jobs or be in jobs where you are coding websites for companies, this is something you're going to want to pay attention to, because there is currently no settled legal standard as to what constitutes compliance and accessibility. And that's what's caused such a headache for so many people who are trying to avoid being sued. So yes, you want to mitigate the risk of lawsuits. That's a big motivation to make your website accessible. But the bigger picture is that you want to do what's lawful and right, and you want to do what's going to be additive for your business too. So I think it's really interesting to think about some of the benefits to coding a website in such a way that a screen reader will interface with that website and understand what's being shown on that site. Because I can tell you, talking to a lot of companies who've done this work, they have said, hey, I never thought I'd see a 10 or 20% spike in revenue, but it turns out the people who I was alienating before can use my site now, and they like to tell their friends, many of whom are in the disabilities community, hey, don't go to vendor X who doesn't care about us, go to vendor Y, they've taken the pains to make their website, and oftentimes their app, if they have a native app, or their mobile website, accessible. So don't think about this just as, how do I cover myself in case I get sued? It's how do I grow my business and reach a larger audience? So the couple key takeaways I would say, and I'll hit the high points and we can come back to those that are interesting or relevant. Number one is that accessibility is an ongoing project. This should not be thought of as a set it and forget it kind of thing. You can audit a website, which is what we do, and we use human beings who go through every element of that site, and we'll come back and tell you every single thing that we find that isn't compliant with the current standard. So you can audit, you can fix the site, but you want to keep an eye on it because content is always changing. The laws and regulations around accessibility are always changing. The search engines, their algorithms are always changing. So you have a lot of different variables here that make it imperative to stay on top of this project. Number two, in league with that, you don't want to go it alone on this. We work with some of the best developers in the world. They're brilliant, brilliant minds, and even they botch this because they're just not seasoned in ADA compliance. They didn't learn this. They went into development because they love building cool stuff. And that's their mandate. So they build cool stuff. And then lo and behold, the people for whom they build it get a lawsuit, and then they turn to their developer and say, help me. And too often those developers will say, look, I want to cover myself and not lose my client. So I'll just tell them, yes, I know how to fix this. And what they do is they run out and find a bunch of free tools. And oftentimes those are widgets. Oftentimes they're widgets or plug-in tools or overlays, and they'll slap one on and they'll say, all right, you're all good, Mr. or Ms. Client. Go back to life as you know it. And you've actually made things worse. And so we get it. People don't want to lose the business, so they do this, but it's the exact wrong thing to do. So I would just say
Jeremy's tiptoeing around calling some of these out by name because he's a very good person. but Claudio is chomping at the bit to call out some of the worst offenders like Accessibility and some of the others that, like Jeremy said, make your site worse. And in fact, there are lawyers now that are out there looking for sites that have these plugins because they know that those sites are not accessible. These sites, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, but these quote unquote plugins or whatever that widgets you can add to your site that are supposed to solve all your problems are actually waving a giant flag saying, "Hey, come sue us," because they're making things worse.
Are we allowed to swear on this panel?
They, it's a little bit like
I'll allow it.
Like slapping a Band-Aid on something that really needs surgery. That's the analogy we use. But yeah, you're signaling to the world, hey, we didn't care enough or to invest the money and the time and the resources into fixing the underlying code. And I'm not going to talk about UX and UI because that's stuff that Emily and Claudio know better than I. But you want to fix the underlying problem. And I'll just underscore this with one point, and then I'll open the floor back up here. One of our colleagues at a different company that does what we do, he and I have begun a dialogue because he, like me, tracks all of the thousands of cases that get filed in federal court in this space. So we share data from the trenches. And I asked him the other day, I said, hey, I have a company I know of that's been sued 15 times. Now they're a big company, they're a big multinational company, and they have subsidiaries and all kinds of holdings. So when you add up all of the lawsuits from all of the plaintiffs and attorneys who've gone after them, it's 15 or 16 in just the last 3 years. Do you know of any companies that have gotten hit more than that? And he gave me the name of one, which I will not share on this call. Suffice to say, you may have some of their very high-end fashion hanging in your closet. They've been sued 30 times.
Wow.
In the last 3 years.
Wow.
30 times. And just to take you through the money on that and the expense, and then I really will open it back up to you guys. It can be anywhere from about $5K on the low end to settle, meaning to pay off the plaintiff, because 99% of these cases, 99.9 do settle or are dismissed. So you have to pay that on the low end. I've seen as much as 20K on the high end just to make the suit go away. That's with one plaintiff.
But then that doesn't include remediating the site.
That doesn't include attorney's fees on both sides. It doesn't include auditing. It doesn't include remediation or ongoing compliance. So when you add up the cost, all in all, it is typically a six-figure proposition to fix a website and to defend one of these suits. Now, add in the fact that you've got other attorneys and plaintiffs jumping in and saying, hey, those guys got sued. We know they settled. We know they didn't fix their stuff. Why don't we jump in? And there's currently nothing in the law that prevents it. There are some defenses that lawyers have tried to mitigate the impact, but you're basically, it's open season now. You could have 10 attorneys and plaintiffs jump in and all sue you at the same time, or your client. So you can see where the expense starts to add up quickly. And if you're a small or mid-market business, you can't defend that. It's going to put you out of business. And that's why it's so important to do this work the right way.
So Emily, a lot of people in the chat are asking about tools to help audit a site. And I know that that's something where you have a lot of knowledge and wanted to talk about. So maybe you can speak to that and add your 2 cents here as well.
Yeah, of course. Happy to go over some of those, what those tools are. Just keep in mind, these are introductory tools. These are not going to solve your problems. You need humans to solve, the bigger issues. But this is a good starting point, at least, to understand sort of where your website stands and things that you can fix. So I think Claudio mentioned in the chat, Wave is a great one. So Wave is sort of like, it's a website or like a browser extension, and it will run a check on a URL and it will tell you everything that's wrong or that needs to be improved. It will give you little markings and things of that nature. And so that's
full disclosure. Claudio actually worked on that tool. So just to be, you know,
I
have
know a
full
little bit more
disclosure here.
about it. Yeah, he can expand on that.
And
But-
we could plug Lighthouse, which is has a Chrome extent. You know, it's built into Chrome. You know, and Chris works for Lighthouse, so you know it's hard to not be a little incestuous here. But
Yeah.
sorry,
small-
Emily.
Oh, it's all good. Another browser extension is Axe, A-X-E. It's, you know, similar to Wave. The interface looks a little bit different. Another one is called Site Improve. There's a bunch of different ones that can be used, but I would say probably Wave is one of the, you know, the more popular ones. Another popular tool to use is just a contrast checker. There's tons of them out there. Contrastchecker.com is one specifically. Sketch, if you are designing with Sketch, there's different plugins that you can use. There's also something that I recently heard about, like in the past 2 weeks, called Stark. Claudio, are you familiar with Stark?
Yeah, I'm actually going to be starting to work with Stark pretty soon.
Awesome. So do you want to?
I'll be doing a lot of writing for their community. So it'll be
Awesome.
Is there a Lannister also, or no?
Game of Thrones reference.
I don't know too much about Stark. I just was like reading about their features and I thought like, wow, this is so cool. You can incorporate it into various different design programs. But I mean, since you know more about it, I guess this is a perfect segue to sort of, you know, pass the mic to you. Do you want to speak more about Stark and, you know, sort of what you know about it? It seems like a really cool tool.
So Stark is a plugin that you would use in design tools like Adobe XD. You would use it with Sketch. You would use it with Figma. So their goal is to basically have the equivalent of Grammarly for design. So where, you know, a lot of these efforts, you know, with code and everything else, I mean, it really is like spell check. So it is like checking for real basic sort of preventable things. And if you have a tool that helps you do that, that's fantastic. So Wave, I think you're right, is the best tool to get started with for checking, you know, within a browser. But everything you do in Wave just kind of disappears after you look at the page. To really have that and to be able to save the data, you need to sign up for a platform like Site Improve or like AMP by Level Access. Axe is the tool that DQ has put together, but they have a whole service and a platform behind that called WorldSpace Attest. So, you know, what you want to do if you're like really working as in a QA department with a larger firm is you want to get a platform so you can track the stuff and you can start gathering the data and you can start integrating into your ticketing system. So there's a number of different options, but I think for somebody who's a single developer who's checking their own work and they want like really robust feedback, I would actually recommend Axe as a tool to self-test. And kind of the way you want to approach is you want to be testing as you're developing. And so you want to keep yourself Axe clean so that when you hand off the content, you don't have any errors, you don't have any accessibility issues going into testing or staging or God forbid into production. And you know, these sites that are having these issues in live production versions of their product, it's inexcusable. It just basically is like, they never tested their work. And it's the sort of thing like if you had a site full of spelling mistakes or if you had a site full of broken links, it would never pass QA. So why is it that, you know, major brands are releasing firms, you know, releasing their sites with all these accessibility issues built in? I mean, that's just a major problem.
Claudio, there's a question in chat. What about Andy?
I haven't tried Andy, so I have to plead the fifth on that one.
And this question might be better for Jeremy or Claudio, but or Emily. But how important is it to incorporate actual human testing? You know, I assume like, you know, you're starting out, you use these automated tools and they get you so far, but you know, before you launch or once you're launched, how important is it to actually like do, you know, have human audits or you know, do actual human testing?
Critical. It's critical for two reasons, really. One is that software will only detect about 30% of the total errors or failures on a website, and that's the high end.
30%, you say?
Yeah, about 30. So some of the free tools that are out there are on the lower end, even they're 10, 15%. And the problem there is that you can get both false positives and false negatives if you rely just on software. So if you want to hit the other 70 to 90% of the errors or potential violations, you have to have humans. And here I'm thinking about things like user flows, right? If you have a 3-step flow as part of your checkout, or if you're creating a user account, or whatever sort of process is on the website, no software at this point is going to be able to detect if there are violations there. So that was one thing. The second piece of this is, if you're sued, you're almost certainly going to settle. And your settlement agreement, or your client's settlement agreement, is going to include a provision that says, in addition to testing regularly, every quarter, every half year, using automated tools, you are going to do end user testing as well. More and more plaintiffs are putting that into their agreements, and more defense attorneys are agreeing to those terms. So you actually have to use end user testing if you want to satisfy the terms of your agreement. And if you don't, a lot of these attorneys will come back and sue for breach of contract. So this is something you really, really want to do.
Yeah. Chris, do you have any comments on that?
Well, while we were talking, I was able to find an example when we were talking previously about the unlabeled images. If you're interested in seeing that.
Yeah, can we hear that?
Yeah.
So while Chris is bringing that up, you know, for my web developers out there, I want to just reiterate, alt text on your images is critical, and some of us use like linters, which they kind of test our code as we're coding, and some of those linters, a good linter will call out, it will not let you compile your code or run your code, or at least give you a warning if you are missing an alt tag on an image. So alt tags, using page regions. So in HTML5, there's tags like header, footer, nav, main, aside. That helps give the page structure, which is really good for SEO. It helps Google and other bots understand the structure of your page, but also it helps screen readers and other software like that understand the structure of your page. Content structure, like Claudio mentioned earlier in the chat, like article, section, but also like using the HTML tags for what they're designed for, like a P tag for a paragraph, a UL tag for an unordered list. The tags, the HTML tags, your basic HTML tags, use them for their purpose. It's really important.
This is huge, and this, you can't say this emphatically enough, because when you start getting into JavaScript frameworks like React, or once you start getting into those frameworks, there's such a temptation to use spans and divs and create your own custom elements. But what you may not realize is that there's a whole ton of behavior and accessibility rules that come with the components that you're replacing. So if you want to use a checkbox and you want to use a div as a checkbox, you're going to have to reinvent the wheel when it comes to all of the compliance and all of the behavior that checkbox is doing, and how that's announcing itself to a screen reader. So you've just added on like 100 different ways in which your component can go wrong. So if you want to make that decision to move away from a native HTML component into something custom, just know that there's a whole lot of baggage that comes with it. And I can't recommend emphatically enough that if you want to use a checkbox and you want custom behaviors with the checkbox, use the native HTML checkbox element, so that you're not having to reinvent the wheel and you don't have all these potential points of failure there.
I just want to correct something. You said that, you can't say it emphatically enough. I think I couldn't say it emphatically enough, but I think you got the emphasis right. I think Claudio nailed that, how important it is, please. And you're right. Like, we all are using React and we all have the temptation to use divs for everything. Don't use use the tags as they're intended. It's so important. And Claudio really nailed down exactly why. And then just two other things James Zaka mentioned in the chat earlier, using ARIA labels. You can actually, so there's a meta tag that you could add to your HTML tags called ARIA. And there's all different kinds of ARIA tags. One is just called label, and it allows you to label a section. And just an example, like let's say you have two nav sections in on your page, like you have a main navigation and a sub navigation. Really easy to just say nav, ARIA label, main navigation. Next nav, ARIA label, sub navigation, or something like that. So you can use those ARIA labels. And then finally, but not least importantly, maybe most importantly, is using your H1, your heading tag, your H1 to H6, H1 being most important, H6 least important, right? You should have one H1 tag on your page. Then the subs should be H2, the subs, H3, etc. Super important. And I think you guys saw that, even, the screen reader tells Chris, this is an H1, this is a heading 1, this is a heading 2. So they're there for a reason. Use them, as Claudio said, use the tags as intended. So Chris, you had a, sorry, go ahead, Emily.
Before we get back to Chris, I know you're talking about ARIA labels and ARIA tags. So if you run your URL in Wave, it will tell you all the ARIA, like it will specifically bring up which ones are missing, and things like that. So I know that would be helpful for the developers.
Awesome. Chris, you have that demo queued up for us? Sorry, I kind of derailed the.
Really fine. So it's back to this same website, and I'm just going to go through it line by line, and you're going to hear what happens when it gets to an unlabeled picture.
http://www.ladygardens.org/ file 0 png image daytime sky 407246262 link.
So so if I were to double tap right now,
That's a beautiful picture of botanical garden, right?
Yep. So wait, I'm going to get to that. So here we go.
PNG image
So if you want, I can slow it down.
words.
No, I think we could get it, Chris. That's awesome. So there's a couple of other questions in the chat while we're wrapping up. Matthew Palmer said he was reading about ARIA properties. Has this been the standard, or is there something new? Claudio or Emily, you want to take that one?
I'll give this one to Claudio.
All right. So if there's one thing I want to say about using any sort of ARIA attributes, is it is incredibly easy to misuse them. And developers have a way of using them kind of as like ketchup all over something. And it's, it can be like putting ketchup or A1 steak sauce on a steak, So you can really do a lot of damage with ARIA tags. So if you're going to go down that route, I would strongly encourage you to go to the Web Accessibility Initiative, the WAY site, and really study how those ARIA components work before you start applying them. It's easier to misuse ARIA than your best situations where you don't have to use ARIA in the first place.
Perfect. Well said. Right? Using the right tags, you shouldn't need to use ARIA. Use it sparingly, only when needed. Right? Mm-hmm. Any other last thoughts as we close out, guys, at 7 o'clock? Jeremy, a closing thought?
Yeah, closing thought is, again, don't go it alone on accessibility. Take the time to really understand, as much as you can about it, and of course use Boca Code to do that. And,
or ADA accessibility.
ADA site compliance, that's right. And,
ADA site compliance, sorry, yes, sorry.
And really invest in having a dedicated partner for this, both for your own learning if you're a coder, and for your own peace of mind, and to grow your business if you're a business owner.
Emily, got a closing thought?
Yeah, I think that now accessibility is really becoming popular, as it should be. and people are really starting to understand how important it is. And as educators, it's important, and people who are involved in the community in general and learning about accessibility, it's important to start changing that narrative and just incorporating it into the way that things are taught. So as far as teaching, so you were saying, Jeremy, you have such bright developers, but they're just not trained to understand how to code for accessibility. Same with a lot of UX designers, like they have an idea about it, but it's not so deep into a curriculum or so deep into the work that they do every day that they're just like thinking about it constantly and immediately incorporating these kinds of things. So I think, as educators and leaders, all the leaders here and everyone involved, it's important to start making that shift to teaching it initially, so it's not like something extra that we need to learn, right? And we need to hurry up and figure it out. Like we should just be able to start doing it and teaching it in that way.
And speaking of teaching this, Claudio, you've taught a whole generation, I think, of UX and developers and everyone about accessibility. So what's your closing thought for tonight?
Well, I would say, like, if you're new to accessibility, welcome to this journey. It can be a long and difficult and complicated one. I mean, if you're already into it, we've been doing a lot of accessibility programming lately. So, I mean, I hate to end with a plug, but like we're doing a lot of stuff with the IXDA Miami meetup group. If you want to follow up, I've started setting up a channel on YouTube with recordings of a lot of the presentations that we've been doing. There's probably about 8 of them already there.
And I just dropped a link to this one that should,
right. And so yeah, look up UX Florida on YouTube and you'll start seeing a whole slew of different presentations that we're doing. But yeah, we're starting to little by little put together this library of like really good, interesting content. And I'm hoping now, with Stark, that I'm going to be able to do a lot of publishing and stuff either there or, with Smashing Magazine. So there's a lot of content that's out there. There's more and more. I think next steps, if you're into this journey, I would be like, definitely download some of the tools that Emily put up there. They're incredibly useful. And start checking your work, for Christ's sake. There's no excuse for not having alt tags. Jesus.
Awesome. And Chris, you started us off. You want to close us out? Give us a closing thought?
Well, thanks for doing what you do, because a lot of the technical stuff I might not fully understand, but I definitely can fully appreciate the results of all your hard work and effort, because without accessibility, all of these things are just they're completely unusable. And I'm really grateful for all of you that you have an interest in this, because it makes my life so much easier, and it makes all the people that I work with, it makes our lives so much easier. So I can't thank you enough for that, really.
What a soundbite. Without accessibility, all of these things are completely unusable. Right there. There's the summary of the entire talk. And with that, I'm so honored to be on this panel with the 4 of you. So forget the audience. You guys are great. Thank you all for joining us. But I want to take a minute to thank the 4 of you and say I'm so honored to be on this panel with you guys. And I'm so honored to know you and call you all friends. And thank you guys so much, as Chris said, for everything you guys do. Chris, you too, because you contribute so much, and you guys are amazing, and I appreciate you so much. And thank you again. And thank you all to everybody who's tuned in. And if, as Claudio said, if you're new to this, welcome aboard. We're here to help. And if you're, and if you're old hat like us, like some of us, thanks for doing everything you guys do. With that, have a great night, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you very soon.
Thank you, Ty.
Thank you so much. Pleasure.